Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Branas. I lead the Department of Epidemiology at Columbia University. I also lead our Injury Research, Science and Prevention Center at Columbia University that is connected to and funded by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. Our injury center focuses on many different things, all manner of different trauma and injury, including motor vehicle crashes, sadly for the United States, gun violence quite a bit, but also very much the prevention of suicide. And I think that's partly why we've been asked to connect so much with the GWB, as well as the NIH training program here in Guyana. And I'm honored to be able to be here and to say a few things. I want to just thank Christina Hoven and George Musa, Dr. William Adicro, and Dr. Emmanuel Cummings, and as well as the Guyana government, university, and hospital leadership. And then finally, just to say thank you to the U.S. National Institutes of Health and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control for their support of our connections here. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Judit Balazs, who is a professor at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, Hungary, as well as a professor of Oslo New University College in Oslo, Norway. And Professor Balazs is a child psychiatrist who, in addition to her medical degree, her MD and her PhD, also has a DSc, a Doctor of Sciences from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. So really, really wonderful background. She's a professor, again, as I said, is at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, and is a part-time professor at Björknes University College in Oslo in Norway, and also is connected to the Semmelweis University in Budapest. Professor Balazs is the past president of the Hungarian Psychiatric Association, the chair of the child psychiatry section of the European Psychiatric Association, and chair of the suicide network of the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology. Her main interests are in neurodevelopment disorders, adolescent suicide prevention, which I think we're going to hear quite a bit about today, as well as other mental disorders and, importantly, school mental health services. So please join me in welcoming her to come speak today.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. And it's really my pleasure to be here and to be part of this very important conference. I would like to thank for the organizer, for Christina Hoven inviting me here. So I hope I can add some new information to you. This course is now, it's a CME course, which means continuous medical education course. So basically, I try to tell you some basic knowledge on this field, and partly I would like to talk about our group's research on this field. So as you said, I come from Hungary, which is in Eastern Europe, and I live in the capital, Budapest. You can see one picture from it. And as Christina told yesterday in that interaction, that this country has the highest suicide rate in the world before the 90s, from the last century, the 90s, and that meant about 44 per 100,000, and we managed to get it under 20 per 100,000. So the suicide rate 30 years ago was 35 years ago was comparable with your suicide attempt, and now we are still a lot to do because it's still twice as much as the European average, but it improved. And I joined this work 25 years ago, so I will partly talk about this work. So I choose the title of my presentation, Non-suicidal self-injury, and I will tell you why I put it like this, as you can read in the title. In a moment I share it. So how do we define self-harm, self-injury? What I'm going to talk about to you today, that's the definition what we use in suicidology. We excluded from the definition that type of harm that just unintentionally or unexpected happens due to behavior. Like if we do not wear a seatbelt when we are driving, it cause self-harm. And as I read about your country, this is an issue as well, very high level of car accidents. However, we do not talk about this topic when we talk about self-injury in suicide. And we don't talk about self-injury if we do, for example, extreme sports. However, it can cause self-harm as well. Moreover, those very dangerous behaviors, what we see as psychiatrists, psychologists, if somebody on purpose restrict food, for example, in anorexia, or has substance use or abuse, which problems, behaviors can cause self-harm. But in suicidology, we do not talk about these issues. I told you that I started to work on this field more than 25 years ago during my PhD studies. And I started with suicide behavior. And I just highlighted to you some of our studies. These are the studies what I did after my PhD, partly. We deal with sub-threshold mental disorders. This term, sub-threshold, sub-syndrome, subclinical, means that do not fulfill the core criteria of DSM-5. However, the symptomology cause impairment. And I have very important people during my life who influenced my work, and I learned from them. This French psychiatrist, suicidologist, he is not with us anymore, Yves Le Crobier. His suggestion was to me to focus on this topic Another important paper that was the core of my PhD, that's the prevalence of comorbidity of affective disorders. And what we got those days, that bipolar, and namely bipolar 2 disorder, when manic and hypomanic phases are changes, seem to be very, very high suicidal risk. We were among the first one who published it, and I really would like you to Google the name, check the name of Professor Riemer. He is a Hungarian suicidologist, and he definitely has huge work to decrease our suicide rate. Then I had a project of close link of suicide attempt and mixed bipolar disorder. Mixed bipolar one means that you have major depressive episode, and if you know the symptoms of major depressive episode, you don't find their agitation. However, our patients are very often irritated, which is considered a symptom of bipolar 1. However, it seems to be that if it mixed with major depressive episode, it has a really high suicide rate. And Franco Benazzi was the person. It's worth to read about his work. And then I participated in a huge European project, and I went back to my original interest, subthreshold disorders, and we found in more than 20,000 European adolescents that those young people who has functional impairment has with subthreshold depression, which does not fulfill the criteria of major depressive episode, they already have 3 times higher suicidal risk than those one who do not have symptoms of depression, and those one who fulfill the criteria of DSM-5 depression, they have 9 times higher suicidal risk. And this is a project which was led by Danuta Wasserman in Karolinska Institute. You could hear her welcome words yesterday on the screen. And this is the project where I started to work together with Christina many years ago. And then we had research on media and suicide. I'm not going to talk about details, but it's important to know that media has an important role, both increasing suicide risk and it has a good prevention possibility. And nowadays, I'm connecting my 2 fields, neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD and autism, and suicidology. But all these research, what I show you here, are about suicidal behavior, which contains the wish to die, to think about to die, to have plan to attempt suicide. All these are considered as suicidal behavior. But at the point, more than 10 years ago, I was thinking that it would be nice in my life to deal with something which is non-suicidal, not so lethal. So we started to deal with my group with non-suicidal self-injury. I put it for you, the first definition of non-suicidal self-injury, which was summarized by the International Society for the Study of Self-Injury. You can find it on the internet. And it was already published in 2007. And it's important, its definition, that it has to be deliberate, what I told you, not unintentional, self-directed damage of the body tissue without suicidal intent for purpose not socially or culturally sanctioned. All the words are important. Body piercing, tattooing do not belong to here. And this is a behavior which seems to be that typically starts among adolescents, and interestingly, it seems to be that the prevalence among adults seems to be lower. So we are now having research on it. What can be the reason that the prevalence rate of this disorder decrease among adults? Here I put to you the DSM-5 criteria of non-suicidal self-injury. I do not go through every line because I'm sure you can read it in DSM-5, which is our basic, but it's important that it is based on that criteria, what I just told to you, issued by the International Society Study of Self-Injury. And as in the DSM, we usually have a time criteria. To this disorder, DSM puts that it should be present for 5 or more days in the past year. And what is known now that people do it because they want to reach a better emotional state, and actually they do. But how we consider it, of course, that it's a non-adaptive coping strategy. It's written in DSM-5 as well. It's important that people feel very stressed usually before they act like this. My patients, next to my research, I do daily clinical work, especially with the adolescents, and they tell me that, I have such a tense, such a bad, uncomfortable feeling that I have to do something. And actually, there is that in that moment that they do not want to die usually, but they want to relieve, and they use this non-adaptive coping strategy to get relief. So, and all this behavior, of course, cause functional impairment, and we have to distinguish other behaviors like drug overdose, or it's very interesting, we just started research on it, that if you know about autism, in autism there is a repetitive stereotype form of behavior, and it's a question that how is related to this behavior, because maybe they want to relieve, but now DSM, where DSM-5 is the first classification system where NSSI is included as a distinct symptomology, but now it is under the research suggested for further research. So we do now. And one other thing what I want to tell you, that it's very important, tic disorders, you know about it, Tourette disorder. And in Tourette as well, sometimes people say that I have to do some repeated behavior, inattentional behavior, and it is sometimes self-harm. It's a differential issue, differential diagnostic, but it's under research. So I just tell you some ideas. So when I decided to turn to something, those days I hoped that something which is finally non-suicidal. Then I worked with these two nice PhD students, Gergely Mészáros and Lily Horváth. And first, when we touched this topic, we made the systematic literature review. And actually, I tell you the background that we started the systematic literature review with self-injury and psychopathology, because I really wanted to know what is in the literature. And I suggest you to do this, that if you go to a new field, then see what is already existing. And so we worked with these two people a lot, and we were about to submit our manuscript. And then in the last moment, Gergely just messaged me and wrote me that it's a huge problem. Just a beautiful review paper came out about self-injury and internalizing psychopathology, which was the half of our manuscript. So first we were just completely shocked what to do, because we were working for a year almost. And then I thought to them that, look, this seems to be an important topic if other people work on it. So now we should take then only that part which was not published, self-injury and externalizing psychopathology. And so what the other review paper found, that internalizing psychopathology, like affective disorders, like mood disorders, anxiety disorders, are has a very wide prevalence among people with NSSI. And that's in a way not surprising, but if we want to differentiate between suicidal behavior, then we are not lucky, because it seems to be that they have the same risk factors. And actually, we got the same with externalizing psychopathology. And but this is the quorum. You see, when you do a systematic review, you really have to choose good keywords, and you have to go to big databases and check all papers what you come. So you cannot just do that, oh, it's in this paper I involve into my review. So we went to these 5 databases, and then of course you have a lot of overlapping findings. These are the search terms what we use connected with topic. For example, for self-injury, non-suicidal self-injury, you have to check deliberate self-harm or other SIB is a well-known self-injury behavior, and all cover the same. And if we miss one, maybe we miss one important topic findings. And as external disorders, we added ADHD, conduct disorder, oppositional disorder. Yes. And here that we ended up with these 35 papers. Oh, okay. I go to, and these are our results that actually, next to internalizing disorders, it seemed to be that externalizing disorders has a high prevalence. If you have a patient with ADHD, I treat a lot of young people with ADHD, and you know that one of the core symptoms of ADHD is impulsivity next to attention and hyperactivity problems. So you have to think about it. I will show some study exactly on this topic. So after finding this in the literature, I thought that based on the limitation of those studies, it could be important to collect patients with ADHD, and we use the structured diagnostic interview. You may know the mini international psychiatric interview, which goes systematically through major psychiatric disorders. And I had the new PhD student who joined us, Dora Jury, and that was her topic exactly. And what we did, we included 52 adolescents with ADHD and additional 77 with subthreshold ADHD who had the symptom of ADHD, but not 6 from the 9, what is a requirement in DSM-5. And we used the mini-kit, and I show you what we got. This is the description of our sampler. And what we got, that adolescents, you see the red is that who has ADHD, 52 adolescents, then 2/3 of them had an SSI. And that was another surprising result, that from these 35 people who had ADHD and SSI, then more than almost 3/4 of them were girls. And I really would like to highlight you this result, that if you have a patient with ADHD who is a girl, seem to have an extra high risk of an SSI. Yes. And then other important finding, and I was said in that way, that when we checked the comorbidities of these people who had ADHD and self-injury, they had a very high prevalence. more than 90% of them had suicidal behavior. And this is what, and you can see here additional comorbidities they have. So that's what was my disappointing point. And this is one of the main message of my talk today, that it seemed to be that it's not really a non-suicidal behavior, though in DSM-5 it is considered, and it is included into the name and the definition that it's a non-suicidal behavior. And really, in the moment, the intention why these people make this non-adaptive coping behavior, it seems to be that they have a very high risk of suicidal behavior. So this is a group of patients who really have to take care and be very cautious during our work. So we made a mediation model, and we could highlight that next to having a direct connection between ADHD and non-suicidal self-injury, in addition to, it seems to be that some disorder mediates. That's what you can see on the slide. Suicidal behavior, what I just talked about, psychosis, substance use, and mood disorder. So if patient has ADHD and mood disorder, seem to have an extra high risk of attempting NSSI, and these people could have suicidal behavior. Then we went on with this topic, and we moved to pathological internet use. It's again behavior which is very common among adolescents, and in a way it seemed to be again connected with NSSI. We found here that almost the same disorder mediate the relationship, and it has a direct relationship. Another study, which was Lily's PhD work, we looked for the role of life events, because so far I was talking about other medical risk factors, but we know that there are several life events in all of our life, and in adolescents' life as well. Here we involved the control group and the clinical group, and just seeing the basic statistics, we found that we found a very high prevalence of NSSI in a clinical group, where all kinds of adolescents were with psychopathology, and we have a control group where they were not in clinical care, they were just adolescents. And you can see that's another data what I would like to highlight to, that in the general population as well, we found that almost 1/4 of these young people committed self-harm. And it's a very high prevalence, and there are a lot of thinking about it. So should it be considered as a normal behavior. But if the prevalence rate, it's almost 1/4 of the young people. I am quite often now in Hungary as dealing with suicidology. I am also that what can we do? How do we deal with adolescents? What can we think? Is it fashion to hurt themselves, cut themselves? I very simple tell into the media, to students who I teach in the university, or now to you, that if somebody thinking about hurting themselves, that's not healthy. That person does not feel okay, because if we feel okay, I hope you know as well that then we think about other things, but not hurting ourselves. So it's there are a lot of myths about suicidology, and I don't know how is it here, but in Europe or in Eastern Europe, in Hungary where I come from, and in a country which had such a high suicide rate tradition as you, it's said, for example, that they just want to get attention, and I'm very angry of this way of thinking that. They want to get attention, but we have to give it because they don't feel okay. So that's a very alarming result of Lily's PhD, that in the control group, which is a normal population, we found high prevalence. And about life events, we found a direct relationship between life events and NSSI in the clinical group. These are the life events what I would like to highlight: trouble with parents, lower grades than expected, argument with close friends, or minor violation with law, or breaking up. Some of these life events can have all of us: trouble with parents, or usually we cannot avoid, nobody can avoid a breakup. But if we are healthy, we can go on. Nobody's happy about this behavior, but we go on. But it seems to be that if you belong already to a clinical population and you have these life events, negative life events, then it increases NSSI. And about this study, I'm the time. Okay. So this is a big European study where I got closer to work with Christina, and all with these people. In one side, in the right side, you can see the international group, the leading group from Karolinska, Vladimir Karli, and Marco Sarcafone, and Camilla Wasserman next to the two leading person. And this is my team, and we extended the original study in Hungary. The original EU-supported study was on high school students, and we were granted for that, and we had a lot of nice results on that. If you put in the literature, Saley, the published with this group a lot. But my team in Hungary, we put it on a topic because we were interested in a population which usually do not get such a high attention, and they seem to be having lower access. So I was really interested to go to vocational schools. And this is the people who we work, some of them you know, and Ágnes Keresztény, Dóra, Szent Iványi Gyöngyvér Tálos worked on it. All these studies, what you do, especially focused on suicidology or non-suicidal self-injury, which seem to be suicidal as well. As I told you, we always need a very strong clinical background because in practice as well, because we directly focus this risky behavior, and if we search for it, it's in a way a good direct screening as well. However, for ethical reasons or for clinical reasons, you have to help immediately if you do this type of research. So it's not nice to do, or I can put it easier, it's unethical to do that you collect data, and I and my team is interested in suicidology and we want to make nice PhDs. Of course, that's important, but it's not okay that in 3 months or half a year, when we work on the database, we find that, oh, this high suicidal rate, what I just showed you. So when we screen, we made a direct screening immediately in this all type of research, and we offer in 24 hours a clinical interview. And because a questionnaire is just a questionnaire, and if we find during the clinical interview suicidal risk as well, then we suggest direct help to these people. That's why some of the people in my team, like Gyöngyvér Tálos, she is a clinician and waiting for the patients and makes a free place in her agenda next day when we make the direct screening. So what we got in this research, we managed to get 1,000 students in high schools, which was a criteria in the SAILI study with the international team to have at least 1,000 students in every country. And then without budget, we went in Hungary to vocational schools. I do not suggest you to do study without budget, but coming from Hungary, maybe it's useful for you as well that it's possible to do. Not nice. So I am but yeah, I get from time to time to the situation. It's better to have your minister, president here and to lobby for mental health, because it should be supported because of a lot of things what you hear during this conference or you know originally. But so what we did not have project support, but I involved my PhD students and then somebody in the clinic, and we managed to get 140 students who could get extra care in this way. So not only in research, but in clinical practice. And Yes, this is a very alarming data as well. In high schools, we get a high prevalence of NSSI. 17% of high school students attempted NSSI. However, in vocational schools, we found almost double prevalence. So it's exactly a population who should get extra focus. And in majority of the world, unfortunately, it's a neglected population. So I would like to highlight you that if you have budget, or if not, then you can work with this population. Just very shortly about quality of life, we found that it's very complicated thing. There are, it goes automatically, I should hurry. It's said that we found that quality of life, which has a broad definition, what does it mean, quality of life? But more and more, I think in my clinical work, that's what we work for, the increasing level of quality of life. Directly, it's not included in the classification system. Functional impairment is included, which is partly overlapping, but it's different. I don't go to details now. I don't want to overgo my time, but it's important to think about it, that measuring quality of life, it can be that somebody does not have a disorder, but still feeling a lower quality of life. And it seemed to be mediated between NSSI, so it can be a risk factor. And the last topic, just very shortly from our group, with Xenia Volovic, who is another PhD student. Many years ago, we started research on immigrants, children's mental health. And we did it, we started it when still in Europe was not so hot topic, immigration. And we were thinking that it's an important population, but what to focus on. And as Hungary is a post-communistic country, and we had Russian-speaking people from different generations, we started with this population. Now you have heard about the Ukrainian-Russian war, which is just next to Hungary happening. And we are a receiving country. We got a lot of immigrants. So in the first days, I went as a volunteer to the stations to help. And now I work with my team, actually again without money, and helping to Roma refugee children and parents, and there we can use some of our experience in that work. And here I went to both quantitative and qualitative studies, which was a new turn to our group. And what we found, that's why I wanted to mention to you that that loneliness, stress, and decreased quality of life seem to be a very high risk factor of self-injury behavior among immigrants, children, adolescents. So next to the risk of being adolescents, this change, what they have to do, moving to another country, being isolated in language, getting no new new culture. And often they get into better circumstances, but still it seems to be a risk factor for NSSI and suicide as well. Yeah, I told it to you. So this is my group who we work very intensively together. We did during the COVID. Luckily, we have our meetings often in person, but we kept the online possibilities. Last year, I joined you online, actually. Some of you may saw me those days as well. I planned to come last year as well, but I had a bad life event. My father got to hospital, so I did not come last year. But online we were familiar, and I was here. Luckily now my father is okay, so I'm here with you, and I took our research with this too. I hope you can use some of the ideas. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, my name is Stanton Critchlow. I've been mentally ill for 20 years. I've been diagnosed with bipolar 1. And my first question to you, what is the suicidal rate with persons with bipolar 1? How high it is? And second question is, somebody who is suicidal can also be homicidal. And is there any studies that you have done on homicidal? Okay.
Thank you for your question and sharing all these. So what research shows that among people who has both phases, major depressive episode and sometimes manic, so considered bipolar 1 patient, they have a higher suicide risk, especially if it's not treated. If it is treated and you have the not up and down, then it decreases very much. I just highlighted bipolar 2 because it is often not recognized and not treated, because hypomanic phases are often covered because the person can still function. So if it's a treated bipolar 1 disorder, then the suicide risk decrease very much. That's one of my answers. And we do not have study on homicide, so I do not have special knowledge on that. Yeah.
Well, okay. So remember you had one study about the differences between suicide behavior in vocational schools and in normal high schools, and you said that you could find higher suicide behavior in a vocational school. So could you draw from that people coming from not very well-to-do, or let's just say a lower socioeconomic background, have more unfortunate ways of coping, like you said, because NSSI would be non-adaptive coping mechanism. Also, that was one question, right? Whether it would be a direct relation. Another question was, remember how you said that sometimes when you're doing a study and you realize that they might not be in a good place such that they might need intervention. Even though you said that you might have had clinicians who might have helped them out, so do you just simply remove them from the study, or do you keep them part of it, or what? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, very good questions. The high suicide or higher suicidal or NSSI level in vocational schools, there can be, I think, multi-causal reason behind. One thing what we measured as well, that the life events what these people have in vocational schools are different than the life events in high schools. So, for example, being the parents being in prison, it's much higher, significantly higher in vocational school than in high schools. And in high schools, getting wrong note, so having problem in school studies, that's a life event. But in vocational school, violent or completely different things. So I would like to highlight this as one of among several reasons. The slower CES, what you said, that's there as well. To your other question, no, it's a very good methodological question. For ethical reasons, we do not take out these children or adolescents because it's a big advantage of all research that they get extra focus. And as we like to take intervention as well, then it's not fair that we screen them, we see that they have higher suicide risk, and then, but when analyzing the data, we cover this issue in statistical matter. Thank you.
Any more questions? How about, are there any young scientists in the room that want to ask a question? No?
No.
All right, so I have one question, and then perhaps we'll close after that. I was impressed with your systematic review, and I know that thousands of people around the world have looked at that. For those of you who don't know, these systematic reviews and meta-analyses are effectively studies of studies, right? And there's a study now published. The estimate is one new scientific study every 30 seconds, right? So you can imagine we've accumulated a lot of these, and so the new information age is such that we have to do these accumulated studies of studies to figure out what is the body of evidence. So your systematic review on suicide prevention programs, I guess, which is one that, again, a lot of people have seen, it brought out a couple of things that were basically that accumulated science says are very effective. The one is means restriction. And I think what was pointed out there was means such as pain medications like analgesics and things like that. So overdosing on those. The other was a hotspots approach. So restricting where people, for instance, people jump off bridges and jump off cliffs and things, and putting actual restrictions to those places has been very successful in preventing suicide. And the last one was school-based awareness programs. So just reflecting a little bit on Guyana, Dr. Hoven was presenting yesterday and pointed out two major challenges to suicide in Guyana. And the one is pesticides and the unfortunate consumption of pesticides, and the other was hanging and asphyxiation. And I wonder, given your experience with that very large systematic review, what recommendations you might make for Guyana in terms of suicide prevention?
As we run out from time, I got a sign while you were talking. I would answer this question like that tomorrow I have a talk. I was invited by Christina on school prevention. And I exactly will focus in a whole lecture on experience, pros and cons in prevention programs in school. So I that's a very important and effective with its limitation. So I would answer your question more detailed tomorrow than that presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. And thanks, everybody. If there's no more questions, thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it. And please, another round of applause for our speaker.
Thank you.